This is MegaZeux tutorial 15. This tutorial discusses editing and using the overlay. The overlay is a graphics layer in MegaZeux that exists above the playing board. So if you think of custom floor, or if you think of floor, tile, any kind of block that you can walk over in MegaZeux as being like a floor, then the overlay is like a ceiling. It will exist above everything on the board. Every board in MegaZeux has an overlay available to use, whether you want to use it or not. You can choose to turn it off if you don't want to use it, although it's always there, and it's the size of your board. So whatever size you set your board to, your overlay will be that size as well. To get to those settings, you would press I for board info, and over here you have your overlay settings. If you want to turn overlay off entirely, you would select no overlay. The default setting is normal overlay, which is just an overlay that displays whatever you put on it in whatever location you put it in. Static overlay is a little bit different than a normal overlay because it does not scroll with the game board. So as the board moves around, the overlay stays in one spot. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. And transparent overlay is an overlay that exists, can have information stored on it, can have graphical data stored on it, but it won't be displayed during the game. And I'll show you that as well. Alright, so I've already got a game that I've started here and abandoned, but I'll go ahead and show you what I've got here so you can kind of get a feeling for how the overlay works. So to access the overlay or turn the overlay on so that you can view it in the game editor, you would press Alt-O, and that turns on the overlay. Now, right now the board and the overlay are being shown together as they would be during normal gameplay. If you would like to only see the overlay and not have the board interfering with that, you would press Alt-S, which turns the level itself off. So right now I'm only viewing what exists on the overlay itself. And this is very handy because obviously sometimes it can get kind of confusing whether you are looking at the overlay or the board itself when you're trying to edit. So as long as the board is not being shown when you're in overlay mode, it will stay that way. So if you press Alt-O to end your overlay editing session, you'll turn the board back on and the overlay off, and you can switch back again to the overlay and the board will still be off. So you got to remember to press Alt-S when you want the board to appear again. Okay, now I'm going to show you how the overlay actually works by testing this game out. You can see that the overlay is drawn along with the board. Now when the player moves to the overlay, it appears above him and blocks view of him. And you can see the advantage to this becomes quite clear pretty quickly. Helps add a lot of depth to the game. So overlay can be used to hide things. That's one great advantage of it. I've got some ammunition stored in this bush right here, and the only way for the player to find that would be to actually be just walking around and exploring and happen to step into this bush and touch that ammo. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to do some editing in the overlay. So I'll turn it back on, and it works much like the game board, although there's a few major differences. Basically, to edit a character in the overlay, you need to select a color in a character. So you begin by pressing C to select your color, and then you press Enter to select your character, and you place it with space or tab to draw, or you can create an area you want to fill and press F to fill it. So it's a lot like the game editor itself. If you want to grab a character that's already on the overlay, I'll turn the background off to make this simpler. So if you want to grab a character, you can just hover over it and press Insert to grab it, and then you can begin using it right away. And of course, you can easily delete whatever you draw. Block options are available in the overlay too, just as they are in the normal game editor. So if you press Alt-B to select a rectangle and then press Enter, you can copy a block, you can paste a block, you can copy from the overlay to the game board itself and back again. You can copy repeated, you can move the block, clear the block, flip it, mirror it, anything you can do in the normal game editor. So this one is one that's different though, copy to and from the overlay. So when you select this, it turns the overlay off. Now I'm in the game editor itself, and when I press Enter, you get to decide what type of block you want to save it as, custom block, custom floor, or text. I'm going to select custom floor. And so then it pasted the tree that was in the overlay, and you notice that it didn't overwrite any of the blocks on the board that were space in the overlay. So basically everything in the overlay that was just blank space and had nothing there, it didn't replace the board area there with just a blank space in that square. It left everything intact except for the stuff that it added, which is kind of a nice feature. And then I can copy all this back to the overlay, but of course it's going to copy everything, not just the tree. See that? And now this becomes just a graphics layer. It no longer has any physical representation in the game board. So let's see, I need to show both. There we go. So this is what it would look like now, and of course when I play it, the player would go under it. It no longer has any value to the player in terms of being able to interact with it. It just appears over him. Okay, I'm going to erase all that stuff I just did now. Now there is of course help available for the overlay. If you press F1 and scroll down, you will see editing and using the overlay. So this is a good thing to read. It'll give you lots of good information about the overlay and everything you can do with it. It is important to note that one character cannot be used in the overlay. So you can use every character in the 256 character table on the overlay except for character 32, and that's because character 32 is space. It is nothingness. So it is the negative space that is in between everything on the overlay that you see. So for that reason you cannot place space. So one of the things you could do to the overlay is type text. And you notice that it leaves out a character there. When you hit space, it just spaces over and there's nothing there. So if you wanted to fill that in, you would need to use a different character. Like you would need to go to, suppose, this block here, and you would need to change the color to this and place it like that. and that would fill that gap in. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about static overlay. Static overlay is mainly used for heads-up displays in games, and that is when there is information that you want to always be present on the screen, such as maybe the score or the number of lives, any sort of pertinent game info, and you want that to be displayed in a constant spot on the screen, like the upper left-hand corner, that sort of thing. So that's what I've done for this game. I set up a little thing where I could show you a heads-up display, or how it would look if I was to use one. And I put it right up here in the overlay, because if you're going to have it be static, it's going to not scroll around, and so it's going to basically be at position 0, 0 displayed on your screen. So this is position 0, 0, if you look right here, of the board and the overlay. And so it's going to put this upper left-hand corner wherever your viewport is that you've created. So if you press Alt-P, you'll bring up this information table here, and your viewport X and Y position and width and height are set here. And if you've got your viewport set down to nothing, then you've got your viewport X and Y position at 0, 0, and your width and height of your viewport at 80 by 25, which is full screen. So that's where this is going to appear. And it's going to only display what will fit in your viewport area. So in my case, I've got a 80 by 25 viewport, so it's going to end here. I'm not going to see anything in my overlay beyond what's inside this box right here. So when I turn my overlay to static, all of this stuff down here is going to be ignored. And I've drawn a little example of a heads-up display that would be in my game. It's just got number of torches, time of day, and what day I am currently on. So if I turn my if I test the game right now, I've still got normal overlay, so it's not working like I want it to right now. But if I end the game and I change the overlay type to static, and I test the game again, now all of a sudden I have the static overlay, and it, of course, it doesn't work with the normal overlay. So now I have these gaps here, so I wouldn't be able to use this static overlay when I'm trying to create a game that has you know, things over the player like I am. So you kind of have a compromise there. You have to figure out a different way to do that if that's what you want to do. But that can be done with sprites, things like that. But this just gives you a good idea of what you could do with a static overlay and creating a heads-up display, or a HUD. Okay, now we're going to get into some robotic commands that can be used to control your overlay. So I'm going to create a new robot. Okay, the first command I'm going to show you, the first overlay command I'm going to show you is change overlay. And you need to specify a color and a character, and a new color and a new character. So this is going to change everything on the overlay that is this color and this character to the new color and character. And I've created a loop here so I can have it flash back and forth from one to the other. And that's how that works. And then a slight variation on that command just changes the color and ignores the character. So every color on the overlay that is this color will become this color. And this loop will make it go back and forth. Same thing in this case, because the only characters that I have that color are the trees. The next command I want to show you is a copy block command, and it works just like block copying in robotic on the game board does. So what I've done here is I set up a copy block command that's going to move this block down one space, and I did it right here where this tree is. So what you're going to see is the tree just disappear down into the ground. This block copy command saves the block to an MZM file instead of to another place on the board. So you need to put the file name in parentheses right here and precede it by an @ symbol, and that recognizes that this is an MZM file. The final number needs to be either a 0 or a 1. A 1 if you're saving the block as graphical data, and you'd save it as 0 if you're going to save non-graphical data like robots with their code intact. You would do that mainly if you were going to be copying a block from the board itself rather than the overlay. So I set up a little thing here to show you how this could be used. One way it would be used would be to save a section of your board to an MZM file to bring it back up later. For example, if you've modified a section of the board and you want to restore it to its previous appearance, you could do something like this. So this simple example just uses pressing keys to make the overlay block disappear, and then pressing key Y brings the MZM file back on the board again. So it's as soon as I started the game, it saved the file. T makes it disappear, and Y makes it reappear. And you can see if I go down here, it saved the file as tree.mzm. Alright, the next set of commands are to turn the overlay off and on and make it static. So overlay on, overlay transparent, and overlay static is what you would type to use these commands. And I just set up a quick example here where I press keys to change it. So overlay transparent, overlay static, and overlay on. Okay, the last two commands I want to show you, put overlay on the board and write overlay on the board. So the first one is if you want to place a single character on the board, and this would most likely be a non-text based character. So you would type put and then select your color with F2 and put in a character with F3 and then type overlay and the location on the board. So for the purpose of this example, I'm putting it relative to the player, so I'm preceding that command with relative to player, and what this is actually going to do is going to create a little shadow beside the player. And this is going to be a loop, so it's going to first erase the previous overlay using this change overlay command. So I'm changing this character to space or nothing, and then I'm replacing it beside the player. I'll show you how that works. So the player has a little shadow when he's walking around. Doesn't really fit with the game, but it's just an example. So that's the put overlay command. The last one is the write overlay command, and this is also going to be relative to the player. I'm writing on the overlay, and I just selected a color, and then in parentheses you type your message, and then the location at the end. So when I press T, there, holy cow. So I'm not going to get into all the games that use overlay. There's a lot of them. Practically every game in MegaZeux uses overlay in some way. Here's a good example of one. This game is called Derby Town 2, and it's a really great old classic MegaZeux game. And the creator of this game uses overlay here for the town clock. So you can see the clock scrolling the time, and the player can walk behind it. So there's a good use of overlay right there. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If it's helped you in some way, drop me a message and let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks very much. Bye.